When I first inherited the CMX community, I suffered greatly from imposter syndrome, and I definitely still do. I'm a community manager who manages the community of other community managers. And I think it's really important to always have the accessibility, the inclusivity in the front of your mind. Building tools and programming for folks that are not like you. I mean, when hosting an event like CMX Summit, we are actively seeking out speakers from historically underrepresented groups to try to make it so that all of our members can and do see themselves on our stage.
Welcome to the Digital Community Leaders Podcast, a conversation with experts diving into their insights and leaving you with actionable ideas. And today I am so excited to be joined by Beth McIntyre, the Director of Community at Bevy and CMX. Beth has actually given me a heads up and let me know if you listen to the end of this podcast, she gives you all the information you need for a little discount from CMX Summit 2025. Beth is a champion of community managers, helping them to be their best, and CMX is a 15,000 strong hub of community professionals who are connecting and learning together. I'm so excited to chat to Beth about all things community. But before we do, quick word from our sponsors.
We are Steadfast Collective. We exist to craft digital applications that bring people together. A team of smart creatives, we are excited by technology, and we always aim to leave the internet in a better place than we found it. Working with many of the UK's leading communities, we use technology as an accelerator to help them grow and engage their members. Our applications resource membership organisations, grow businesses, and create value. We know what it takes to ship, market, and scale applications, and we apply this wealth of background knowledge to everything we do. We're not just another agency, we are community builders.
Hey Beth, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you doing?
I am really well. Thank you for joining me. How's your week going?
Really good, really busy. We're revving up for a couple of different events coming up. We've got some big changes in the community, so just trying to get all my ducks in a row.
Nice. And so let's jump in straight into that then. What sort of things are coming up? What's changing? What's keeping you busy at CMX?
Well, we actually have decided to rev up our event series, the CMX Masterclasses again. We kind of slowed down a little bit last year. We made some changes around our big flagship conference dates. So we decided to put a hold on our other monthly events. Now we're like, we miss these. Let's bring these back. So CMX Masterclasses are a monthly event series that kind of deep dive into all things the community industry. And then we also host monthly events for the Bevy Community Manager Webinar Sessions series, which are events that focus more on community-led and distributed events and chapter programs. So busy with events.
Busy with events. Yeah, well, events are good, aren't they? There's so many things that you can read and kind of watch, but actually getting to interact with people, whether virtually or in person, there's kind of nothing like it. And I think we learned the value of events quite quickly in the pandemic when we got afterwards. We were like, people were desperate to get back out from their screens. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you're seeing the same sort of thing, your side.
Definitely. I think that every community program needs to have that combination of, we call it like asynchronous and synchronous programming. So the synchronous is that event. It's like, how do you actually connect with people in real time, whether it's virtual or it's in person? You're seeing someone live, you're typing into the chat, you're getting responses right then and there. You're part of something in the moment. I think that's such an important part, like in addition to all of your other programming. Of course, then the asynchronous is that online forum, is the Slack community, of Facebook group, whatever platform you're using. It's important to have a combination of both.
Yeah. I always find that events, especially in person, we talk about it in the book, but they make really great chance for like FOMO moments, like things that people, your community kind of want to get behind. And it's great punctuation in your year. It's so easy for kind of every year or every month to feel really similar. But these big punctuation moments where, no, it's Summit this year or whatever it is, it's a thing to kind of point towards.
Yeah. And events also I think events are really accessible when you do them the right way, because they give folks the opportunity to show up live, to be a part of it right here, right now, whether it's in person or virtual. If it's in person, obviously you get that exciting feeling of like the body language and high fives and the physical contact. If it's virtual, obviously you have the comfort of your own home, which is so nice. But then it's also accessible for the people who maybe are in a different time zone, maybe didn't have the time to actually join you virtually. Maybe they have a kid homesick, so they couldn't join. But then they get to watch the replay. So by having this like a really kind of robust events program, you can have that asynchronous or the synchronous connection that also then becomes content, which is like, the gold mine.
Nice. So rewinding a little bit, you're director of community at Bevy and CMX. So how did you first find out about CMX, get involved in CMX? What was your first kind of foray into community?
Well, I was hired by Bevy, and I was a community events marketing manager. So events were kind of right from the very beginning of my journey in this industry. My first experience with CMX was actually CMX Summit 2018. It was also my first ever conference that I had ever been to in a corporate setting. And wow, when I tell you that it like ruined every other conference for me, because a few weeks after Summit, I went to another like event conference and it was horrible. So I think CMX Summit was such a beautiful coming together of people who are all interested in the same thing, but come from completely different backgrounds. And I was like, okay, I found my people. Like, here's the folks who are genuinely interested in building relationships and helping each other. And they weren't trying to collect people, like LinkedIn came up really organically after you had a great, meaningful conversation. Nobody was collecting contacts. It really felt like people were there to build friendships and, meet their peers and have real conversations. So that was kind of the first taste of CMX that I got. Then a couple of months later, I was part of the acquisition. So that was when I started to really work on CMX and inherit the CMX community.
2024 was my first CMX in person, and I went to Startup Grind before it, which was good. But as soon as the night before, we met up, a few CMXers met up, and I was like, oh, these are my people. These are my people. Okay, now I feel comfortable. Now this is my jam. And it felt just really inclusive. And I know that like diversity and inclusivity is really important to you. How do you kind of weave that into making Summit feel like a safe space for as many people as possible?
Well, I mean, inclusivity and accessibility really go hand in hand. The first time I really started thinking about it, and maybe this is too late, probably is too late, was in 2020 when we all moved virtually. And I learned that there are, bylaws and laws in place for in-person spaces like buildings and offices they have to include certain accessibility details, right? Like ramps and tactile paving and the pedestrian signals that beep. But there are no rules like that for virtual spaces. So like zooming features and high contrast fonts and, screen reading allowance and all that sort of thing like that. Those are all nice to haves. So before we built our own virtual conference platform at Bevy, we hosted a virtual event on a different platform and they didn't have closed captioning as an option at all. And I couldn't believe that. I feel like those features should be built in. And I'll just say quick plug, that's built into Bevy virtual. and you're able to translate live when you're using Chrome. So like it's 2024. I feel like that makes sense. But when we go back to that in person, I think it's really important to always have the accessibility, the inclusivity in the front of your mind. So like building tools and programming for folks that are not like you, asking members about their experiences with your programs and your community. And I mean, when hosting an event like CMX Summit, we are actively seeking out speakers from historically underrepresented groups to try to make it so that all of our members can and do see themselves on our stage.
And with it being an event and a community for community professionals, do you feel like an extra level of pressure because these folks who are attending the event are thinking about this sort of stuff for their events and their community?
When I first inherited the CMX community, I suffered greatly from imposter syndrome, and I definitely still do. I think that my position is really unique in that I'm a community manager who manages the community of other community managers.
Yeah.
So when I'm trying to engage with people, they're like, yeah, Beth, we see you. Like, we know your tools, your tricks. So I really did feel that imposter syndrome, especially in the early days. But I kind of changed my perspective. And instead of thinking, oh, these people can see right through me, instead I started to ask, like, if this was your community, what would you do? I really started to think of it as a positive, because while, the people in my community, they know what my tricks are, they can see right through what I'm trying to do. They also understand what I'm trying to do. So I really do take solace in the fact that when I have a challenge, they probably have also faced that challenge. When I tell them what's going on behind the scenes, they have empathy because they also are experiencing similar things with their communities behind the scenes. So I still definitely get imposter syndrome sometimes, but I do count myself very lucky to manage such an empathetic community.
And I guess you have a bit of and obviously you weren't there day one. So in terms of that, you inherited it. There must have been things that were legacy and like culture where you're like, oh, okay, there might be things we want to change here or things we want to work on and whatnot. And it must have been interesting just inheriting a community in general because there's so much there. Like transition in any business or community is always interesting. And obviously then having Bevy come in, you being part of that must just been quite interesting time, I guess, like lots to do.
Yeah, I'll be totally honest. The early days of the acquisition, we were like, okay, we're not making any changes. Like this CMX is going to continue how it has been. And we're just going to, obviously, like we're going to just start looking at the data and the information. So I do like to think that in the early days of the acquisition, and even now, I think we did a pretty good job of like easing into that. There's probably people out there who disagree. I'd say there's a lot of people out there who don't even know what Bevy is, which probably much to like my boss's chagrin, because we probably could talk about Bevy a little bit more in the community. But it was definitely daunting, especially because, like you said, that culture is like so ingrained right from the beginning. The expectations are set right from the beginning. So when you do go and you change things or you look at programming from a different perspective and you decide maybe we don't need this programming anymore, will this change the culture? Will this change people's experiences? But again, I'm lucky because our members have a lot of empathy for my team having to make those kind of tough decisions and changes.
In terms of the legacy, because obviously CMX, a lot of it runs on the very active Slack community. In terms of that, has there been any conversation around active members versus members who kind of maybe haven't logged in for years? And how do you kind of balance that? Or is it just not a concern for you and you're just happy for people just to kind of be in there even if they're not getting stuck in?
Like, all communities have different goals, different metrics that they're tracking and different things they're reporting on. So in our case, a super important part of any community is setting expectations. So when I think about the inactive members of CMX, like even before someone joins a community, they should know exactly what the space is for, how to act within it, how they should expect to be treated, what happens if they choose to go against the agreed upon guidelines. So I've even joined a community that right from the beginning was like, this community is for active members. So if you aren't active for 90 days, you'll be removed. So like, great, I knew exactly what I was getting into and what the expectations are. So I continue to operate CMX as like, we're here for you when you need us, always. So it's that kind of mindset. Like if you want to be super active and you have a need for us and you want to log in all the time, please do. If you want to ask anonymous questions and participate anonymously, we're here. If you are feeling good in your work and you don't need to log in and you don't need any support from us, that's fine. I think it's a wonderful use of our community, all of those. And for those who haven't logged in a while, like we'll always be here when you need us. And for CMX, I think our lurkers, like I love our lurkers, or passively engaged members. Yeah, I really think that because CMX is what we offer is just that, like, come to us when you need us, come to us when you need questions answered, when you need advice. I like to think of CMX members as like my colleagues, because oftentimes community managers work on teams of one or even just two. So you can come back to CMX when you need a coworker to like bounce ideas off of, or even someone to kind of complain to. But anyway, we'll always be here when you need us. And we look forward to when you join the conversation again.
Nice. You mentioned there that different communities have different kind of goals and objectives. What are the metrics that matter for CMX to Bevy?
Sure. Well, so I kind of organize our metrics in the 3-level strategy framework. So the first one is business level, then community level, then the tactical level. When we talk about business level strategy, CMX is an acquisition and engagement community. So acquisition marketing, it's how many new leads are we getting? How many sales are we getting? Customer retention a little bit, and like that kind of money. Then the engagement, of course, is new users, active users. Typically for that one, we're looking at events, because that's kind of our biggest program right now is all of our events. So that's our like business level. And then of course, community level strategy, we measure different metrics because we need to be able to measure the health of the community program in order to drive business value. And then of course, tactical metrics are like what are you doing day to day to make your community program successful?
So within CMX, if someone starts asking questions about Bevy or starts showing a bit of interest, you might flag them as a person of interest and work with the sales team at Bevy to kind of make that introduction and transition a bit more seamless. So you can kind of be that friendly face through the process of demoing Bevy, etc. Is that the way it works?
Yeah. I mean, that's like in a perfect world, that's how it works. I mean, we're definitely not the only acquisition community out there. Excuse me. It's definitely, there's like a balance that you have to draw between the member value and the business value, especially in an acquisition community. But the goal is, if we're creating resources and spaces and content that are truly helping people and giving people the tools and the support they need to be better in their career and to, make themselves feel better as a community professional, well, then we're building that trust. We're building the relationship. They're going to come to Summit. They're going to feel, like they're involved, like they're a part of something bigger. And then when the time comes that they're building a distributed events community, or they want to host virtual events or in-person events, well, then that's when we show up. We say, hey, don't forget about us. And I think like, I really do feel like we do a good job of not pushing Bevy down people's throats. And even when I have salespeople get involved in Slack, like they have very specific guidelines for how they're allowed to be involved in the community, which of course is another balance, because you have to motivate them to be a part of it, but then also make sure they're not doing it wrong. So anyway, it's a whole dance, I think, is like finding the balance. I think it's a dance that we do well.
Yeah, I think it is a dance, but a lot of it's around transparency as well, right? Like it's no secret that CMX is owned by Bevy, and there's obviously going to be a fairly clear intention of what that relationship will look like. And I think it's tough, isn't it, when community managers kind of try just to think that community is just for community. And you're like, well, there's probably business objectives behind it, because ultimately someone's paying your salary. There's got to be the right metrics. And I think, having those 3 levels makes so much sense, because you kind of we want to keep the community healthy, but in the same way, there has got to be a financial reason why this thing actually exists, because it can't. It's not a charity at the end of the day, right? There's got to be more reasons than that. And I think sometimes community managers do get kind of so worried about talking about financials or real kind of return on investment, that they really struggle to kind of like toot their own horn when they come into like management meetings, and that they kind of just, everything sounds really fluffy, but really they need to be driving more about the business metrics, because they're the ones that are their boss's boss probably care about more potentially. And I think when I talk to more senior community managers, they're a lot more focused around what their boss's boss is going to think about, and more about kind of return on investment. And it's always interesting to kind of see that difference between folk who are fairly new to the industry and folk who have been around a bit longer.
Exactly. It can feel a little sticky because our work is really social and emotional, and we're building authentic places for people to build meaningful relationships. Like, how could you possibly quantify that? So the work that we're doing, and I think that's why a lot of us got into this industry, is because we're really good at that part. But like you said, that doesn't pay the bills. So it can feel a bit funny to be like, oh, I created 6 opportunities for meaningful relationships. That's worth this much more budget.
Yeah.
But it's definitely necessary. The way that I think about it is like, when I'm implementing programs and I'm deciding which programs to invest time and energy into, I actually look at it through a lens of like member value and business value, because all of our programs provide member value. If they didn't, our members wouldn't show up, obviously. And then all of our programs must provide some level of business value. And of course, some drive a lot more than others. I think the challenge that I personally face is like paying attention to my plate and my bandwidth, because I want to make sure I'm not going to burn out by doing too much. I try to build as much as I can for our members, but I have to remember that at the end of the day, I still have to prove that little bit of business value. So when I'm looking at my plate and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have way too much stuff on the go. Well, then you have to start making those difficult decisions and almost have to like take emotion out of it. I've realized I'm very emotionally invested in some of the programs that I've implemented in CMX over the years, and some of the programs that I've spent a lot of time and energy into building and making bigger and better. But they're just like not hitting anymore. Maybe even the member value has gone down a little bit. The business value we could never prove business value from some of these programs. So yeah, that's kind of that's the ongoing challenge, is like making sure that I'm not doing too much just so that I'm driving more member value, because I do have to find that balance.
And how CMX is always growing. There's always new members joining, and there's always folks kind of getting involved. How do you manage that growth along with the quite large kind of event resource that's needed to just not lose the personal touch? Because obviously there's going to be some members who much more intimately than others, but some will join, come and pass, and you might not have a chance to really get to know them personally. How do you kind of manage that balance?
Well, first I would just like to say I'm like so available. And
says the person who just said she was really busy.
But like, I'm always on Slack,
Sure.
like any member at any time can send me a Slack DM. And it might take me a couple business days to get back to you, but like, I'm there, I'm available. And I don't know if I do a good enough job of like promoting that. But I think that when it comes down to like scaling or growing while also keeping a personal touch, it's again, finding a balance between like automation and personal touches, because we all know personal touches are not scalable. So for example, I think like, wouldn't it be nice if a member joined, you could like send a personalized message based on their profile to every single person, and like a follow-up email with tailored advice and resources. But of course that's just not possible because we would be so busy. So for me, I think it's about automating what you can automate so that you can keep the personal touches that are important. So like, for example, CMX Slack, when you join our community, we have a few automated welcome messages. We have one that talks about the guidelines, the values of the community space. We have another one that goes out with some other resources and like other programs that people can get involved in. And then the third one does not have a call to action, like no link shared. It is from me. And it looks very personal because we have the technology for that now. And it asks people about their current challenges. And that the response rate we get on that email and that message is really high because it's that like, and I don't know, should I feel bad that it's like a fake personal message? I don't think so. Because when people see that and they do want help or they do want to reach out, they do need that extra support, they can reply. And then I'm right there. And I, like me personally, am emailing them back. Those conversations typically lead into video calls and conversations where we can talk through challenges or just talk about what they're working on and get to know each other, which of course is like my favorite kind of personal touch. But the people who get that email and don't need anything right now, well, then they still feel like they had that kind of personal touch. So I think, again, it's just finding that balance between automating so that you can grow efficiently and sustainably while keeping some of those opportunities for personalization.
We recently switched our regular emails to like our customers and whatnot to be plain text rather than like a newsletter design, and they convert way better.
Yes. And I think something that's so important, exactly like the images and that newsletter design. And then even I'll get some emails that are plain text, but like they don't have the margin.
Right, okay.
And I'm like, well, that's clearly like a badly formatted fake email, you know?
Sure.
So I think it's those little details that I'm way more likely to read an email that looks like it was written to me.
Yeah.
And probably respond, even if it's like, hey, this is the third time I'm emailing you. I'll like reach out, be like, hey, yeah, sorry. Like, yeah, I think it's the automation isn't the enemy if it's done well.
No, for sure. And in terms of, so you mentioned there, like obviously you'll jump on and you're available. Do you feel like you do, it must be, I've never run a community anywhere near the size that you're dealing with. How do you deal with like switching off? Like, do you have the CMS Slack on your phone? Like, how do you cope with that mentally?
I am really good at work-life balance. I'll just say that. That's something I learned very early on in my life. So I have Slack on my phone, but I do not have notifications. I think if my company purchases my phone and like buys my phone plan, then yes, there's an expectation where I will do work from my phone. But that's not the case. So I like when I'm in my computer, when I'm working my hours, I am here with the community. And that's just it. I think that, I like to think as well, actually, I'll tell you. So one of the first CMX summits I went to, I heard a talk by Elizabeth Kinsey speak about what she called like the bus plan or the lottery plan, where it's like if you're hit by a bus, or in a more positive note, if you win the lottery and you don't come into work for the next while, will your community go on without you? And she talked about, like how to set up documentation and operations so that it can live without you. And ever since then, I feel like I've built the community to hopefully withstand that. Like if I was to leave, or even a short vacation, or if I get sick or something like that. I was recently on parental leave, so I learned a lot about what I need to do in order to like prepare CMX to go on without me. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded explanation.
No, and that's really important because it's CMX. It's not the Beth McIntyre community, and that's really important. And when we were growing Steadfast, that was really important that it didn't become the Pete Heslop company. So we built in tools, and we are a process and documentation first company. So if there's not the process and documentation, the thing shouldn't happen. For that exact reason, if I get hit by a bus, then the world should go on. And for me, it makes me so happy when I come back. I came back from 2 weeks of leave recently, and I had like a few hundred emails, but when I whittled them through, I had like 5 that actually needed my attention. And I was like, this is because we've built
a process where people can deal with it. And we actually wrote, we've got a document called like the Pete Heslop emergency document, which actually explains what happens if I literally do get hit by a bus. Like, talk to this lawyer, then talk to this is our solicitor, this is our accountant. Like, it goes through all the details of like who to speak to in what order, because you never know. I'm really bad at work-life balance, so I have two phones.
Oh.
I have my personal phone and then my work phone that stays on my desk, because I can't be trusted to have email on my phone. Because my brain can't cope with it.
Yeah, it's definitely easier said than done. I know that there was a time last year when I, was at Starbucks or something, and I was going through a really challenging time at work, and I was at a coffee shop, and I just looked at the barista and I was like, wow, it must be so nice to just like leave work and then you're just gone from work, what a concept to not be carrying decisions around with you. So yeah, it's definitely, it's hard sometimes.
So working in a coffee shop used to be my go-to on a stressful day. It's progressed onto being a postman. I would love to think that the most stressful part of my day could be, did this piece of mail go through the door? Like, how incredible would that be?
And then you just get to walk all day.
Yeah.
Listen to music.
We've digest. Beth, what's the future for what you're up to, what CMX is up to? There's another summit coming up. You've got new events coming up. Tell us about what's coming up.
Yes. Well, like I mentioned, we're revving up our monthly event series again. So we'll be hosting 2 events every month, CMX masterclasses, which are the deep dive into kind of all things community, and then our Bevy community manager webinar sessions, which are focused more on like event programs and chapter programs. And then, yes, CMX Summit 2025. I can't believe we're already starting planning for it. May 1st and 2nd, 2025 in Redwood City, California. Early bird tickets are on sale until October 31st.
Okay.
And then I also figured if people are listening to this and they want to come to Summit, if you send me an email or DM me on LinkedIn, I'll get you an extra $50 off your ticket. So just come and ask for a discount.
Thanks, Beth. That'll be good. No, it'd be good. I really did enjoy my time last time. It felt so good being there and seeing so many friends. I met so many folk from the UK there. It was actually ridiculous. So it was my first time meeting Rich Millington. We both flew all the way to California. And I also met somebody from about 10 miles away from where I live. We'd never met before, but we both met at the pre-drinks the night before. So I went all the way to California to meet lots of folk from the UK, and it was a wonderful time.
That's awesome. I think some of the feedback we got from Summit last year was people really liked the multiple opportunities to actually meet and chat. Of course, people appreciate the talks. They like hearing celebrities. They like listening to people talk. But this year, I really do want to put more energy and effort into planning opportunities for people to meet and mingle. We're looking into what would the word be? Intentional matchmaking. So like, how do we connect people with each other based on their profiles? How do we give people opportunities for more dinners? Like you and I met at that dinner, and it was, that's not where we met. We had such a good time at that dinner.
Yeah.
So I just think like more opportunities for people to have space to like meet and talk about what they do and problem solve together. That's kind of where the magic of CMX Summit comes from. So we're definitely going to have that as a focus this year.
I think that's the magic of a lot of conferences, is what the conversations in the corridors while the main talk's going on, and you should be in there, but you've snuck out for a drink and someone else has snuck out and you get to chatting to them. And yeah, like I really enjoyed the dinner, the drinks the night before, and just getting to meet people who you only get to chat to on Slack every so often and meet them in real life. It's always great. And I did hear that previous years there was karaoke, and I was a little bit disappointed that last year there was no karaoke.
Yes, karaoke has always been a member-led extracurricular event. And just due to the date change and some of those changes we had to make, certain members were just unable to attend or didn't want to attend. And so I'm hoping this year we can bring it back. I was like, should I take on karaoke as like an official CMX Summit event? But I didn't know if my boss would be like, yeah, here's some budget for that. I think it has to remain like member-led.
Also, I'm exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're there at like 2:00 in the morning trying to do karaoke and you know you're on stage in a few hours' time.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. I definitely I have reserves of energy that I didn't know existed. Like when I'm at CMX Summit, I'm like, wow, where did this 10th wave of energy come from? But a girl still has her limits.
And then on the flight home, you're like, and I'm done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. Beth, it's been so good to chat. Thanks for taking the time chatting to us about CMX and what you're up to and just about community in general. It's always good to chat. And I really do appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks. It's been such a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks. I will see you next year at Summit, if not before, somewhere online.
I hope so.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I appreciate you listening and watching along. Reach out to Beth for a discount code for the early bird ticket of CMX Summit 2025. And I'll see you next week. Cheers.
This is the Digital Community Leaders Survey 2023. And this is the Digital Community Leaders Survey 2023 second edition. Back in 2023, we released a beautiful printed book. And due to its popularity, we sold out of printed copies. Rather than reprinting, we listened to your feedback and we included 40% more content in this copy. We created the report to be a data-backed handbook for building the foundations of your brand's community. For instance, did you know that 70% of communities we surveyed saw growth over the last 12 months? And we know those businesses are growing too. Other metrics we dive into include community growth, biggest pain points, community purpose, what are other community managers measuring, funding, participation, C-suite involvement, and much, much, much more. In this book, we present the data and expert insights from Richard Gott, Michelle Goodall, Vincent Boone, Keen Bakatari, Rosie Sherry, Matt Sullivan, Laura Roth, Nicole Saunders, Blaise Grimes-Vaught, and Jan Carlisle. We've also included frameworks such as the community archetypes, ecosystem of impact, community participation ladder, and the community first culture nexus. There's so much in here, I can't wait for you to get your hands on this new edition. You can order your printed copy from Amazon today or download a digital copy for free at digitalcommunityleaders.com.